The bridge air, thick with the metallic tang of Kian blood sweat, vibrated under the Supreme Commander's distress. Lieutenant Thole, a creature of tight, muscular coils, felt the humiliation bloom across her violet dermis, staining it an embarrassing, deep cerise. "They are laughing at us." Krallos, his massive, obsidian carapace radiating stress, registered the report through four segmented eyes, which blinked in a frantic, uncoordinated sequence that signaled profound Kian agitation. "They are actually laughing." His four great upper appendages tightened around the command chair's reinforced plasteel frame, the sheer biomorphic strength exerted beginning to cold-forge the metal beneath his grasp. "Replay the transmission," he growled. The immense, crystalline view screen shuddered, resolving the image of the human representative, a female entity, strikingly small, with auburn hair cropped precisely against her pale skull and eyes holding the disconcerting, vivid azure of a Terran primary ocean. Her designation was Admiral Margaret Seraphina, the absolute, governing mind of Earth's autonomous defense forces. "Let me get this straight," she articulated, the curvature of her thin lips, a human gesture of amusement, barely contained. "You, the self-proclaimed, mighty Kian Empire, are initiating a state of total galactic conflict because we deny you unilateral access to trace elements within a barren, cryosilicate asteroid on the geometric terminus of our solar system." Krallos's dense, secondary cardiac organ began to flutter violently, driven into a rhythmic spasm by the sheer, unmitigated audacity of the moment. The disrespect. The profound, suicidal lack of terror. "We are the Kian Empire," he recalled stating in the initial transmission, his voice synthesized for maximum psychoacoustic effect. "We have subjugated 12 complete galaxies, our planetary siege vessels eclipse local suns, and our deployed infantry exceeds 10 trillion organic units. The millennium-old cessation of hostilities initiated by your primitive ancestors has lapsed, and we elect not to reaffirm its terms. Yield immediately or face absolute, comprehensive extinction." And her response? Laughter. She had actually laughed. "You comprehend the temporal duration of our uninterrupted, high-resolution surveillance over the past 1,000 Terran cycles, correct?" Admiral Seraphina continued, her voice unnervingly calm in the recording. "We have continuously logged your encrypted network communications, modeled your iterative technological paradigms, and performed asymptotic analysis on all projected Kian battle doctrines. The so-called peace treaty was demonstrably not enacted for our systemic defense. It was established entirely for your long-term organic preservation." The bridge environment became acoustically inert. 50 Kian organisms, the Empire's highest-ranking tactical minds, focused their multiple, unblinking eyes on their Supreme Commander, awaiting a calculated response to the unbearable psychic wound. "She is generating tactical disinformation," Science Officer Zith, a small, multi-jointed Kian, whispered. "They must be bluffing." "Are they?" Krallos demanded, swiveling his immense, segmented head toward Intelligence Director Phelan. "Provide a calculated assessment of this deviant psychological reaction. Why is there no cowering? No supplication for cessation of hostilities? They are, numerically, a singular biomass confined to one orbital parameter." Director Phelan advanced, the hardened lamellae of his chitinous exoskeleton clicking rapidly, a clear sign of extreme data anxiety. "Supreme Commander, our historical intelligence regarding humanity is severely constrained. The treaty mandated exclusion zones that prohibited any direct, spectroscopic observation. We possess only foundational records. Upon first contact, they were undeniably primitive, having just achieved rudimentary orbital mechanics. Their kinetic weaponry relied on exothermic chemical propulsion, and their medical procedures were barbaric, centered on the physical laceration and subsequent suturing of organic tissues." "And now?" Krallos bellowed. "We possess insufficient data," Phelan admitted, the vocal modulation in his throat unit failing. "The treaty successfully enforced a minimum 5 light-year distance barrier from the Sol system at all times. While our remote sensors logged anomalous, high-intensity energy signatures across several centuries, we have nothing conclusive. It is statistically plausible that their technological vectors have undergone unpredictable acceleration. Krallos emitted a guttural snort of disbelief. A single millennium? Quantifiably impossible. No known sentient species achieves such developmental velocity. Our own empire required 15,000 standard cycles to master generalized faster-than-light travel. With all due deference, Commander, Fleet Admiral Trax abruptly interjected. Prudence dictates we dispatch a cloaked deep reconnaissance vessel to quantify their extant military capability before initiating a full-spectrum planetary invasion. Cowardice! Krallos snapped, the sound cracking like superheated plasma. From a Fleet Admiral. We are the Kian. We execute no reconnaissance, we perform no capability assessment, we initiate conquest. But, Supreme Commander, Trax persisted, her fine facial sensory tentacles writhing in a visible pattern of biomechanical concern, if there exists even a minimal probability that the human's claims are verifiably accurate. Enough! Krallos roared, his towering 12-foot form unfolding from the command chair like an apex predator. Initiate full armada preparation. Every vessel, every organic warrior. We shall physically occlude their planetary skies, we shall induce phase transition in their planetary oceans, and we shall provide these insignificant humans with an irrevocable data point defining the true destructive potential of the Kian Empire. While the bridge officers scrambled to execute the complex, multi-layered orders, a controlled chaos of clicks and synthesized language, Krallos slowly rotated back to the screen, his four eyes locking onto the human image. Admiral Seraphina maintained the same, maddeningly casual smirk. One more datum, she stated in the recording, just milliseconds before the quantum transmission ceased. When you arrive, ensure your deployment includes novel, non-iterative technological constructs. We have existed in a state of self-imposed, systemic technological stasis within this single solar perimeter for 1,000 years, dedicating all processing capacity solely to the strategic eventuality of your predictable return. We anticipate receiving an engaging stimulus. The transmission vanished. Krallos experienced a profound, internal cognitive dissonance, a sensation that the Kian mind archives identified as doubt, a feeling dormant for centuries. He physically rejected the unwelcome psychogenic intrusion, shaking his massive, armored head. Director Phelan, quantify the current estimated human military capacity. Phelan rapidly accessed his tactile data slate. Based on intelligence parameters 1,000 cycles past, their recorded capacity was statistically insignificant, approximately 50 million low-mass infantry units and a projected force of 10,000 chemically propelled, primitive spacecraft. And our current deployment? The Empire maintains a rotational force of 10 trillion deployed organic warriors, with 500 million currently integrated into the Vanguard capital fleet. This armada comprises exactly 100,000 dedicated planetary siege vessels, each structurally engineered to deliver a focused energy yield sufficient to induce core temperature instability and liquefy a terrestrial-class crust. Krallos's dense musculature eased perceptibly. The quantitative data remained irrefutable. Even assuming accelerated human development, achieving parity with that concentration of mass energy destruction was physically unattainable. There is one peripheral factor, Supreme Commander, Phelan stated, his voice now laced with deep, structural hesitation. In our initial psychosocial assessments, we recorded an anomalous species-wide trait. They demonstrate an inversion of the dominance hierarchy, responding to clear existential threats not with submission or flight kinetics, but with heightened, exponentially increasing aggression. Furthermore, their relationship with finite lifespan is highly paradoxical. They possess absolute knowledge of their inevitable termination yet manifest behavioral patterns consistent with biological immortality. This confluence renders their strategic calculus profoundly unpredictable. Krallos terminated the discussion with a sharp, dismissive wave of a tertiary appendage. Psychological peculiarities are insufficient defenses against focused plasma discharge. Set the primary navigation vector for the Sol system. Initiate maximum sustainable velocity. As the colossal, multi-echeloned Kian Armada began its stately acceleration, forming a horrifying swarm of calculated destruction that stretched across parsecs of dark matter, Krallos could not excise the resonant memory of the human's casual, dismissive laughter. It possessed none of the acoustic characteristics of deliberate deception. It was the sound of a sentient being possessing information parity, or, catastrophically, information superiority. For the first cycle in his 300-year biological lifespan, Supreme Commander Krallos felt a palpable, cold psychic intrusion trace the length of his neural cord. The transit time to the Terran homeworld was exactly 3 standard weeks. 3 grueling weeks of continuous tactical preparation, 3 weeks of running iterative, high-fidelity battle simulations, 3 weeks consumed by Krallos's forced reassurance to his skeptical commanders that this operation would proceed as a swift, glorious, and uncontested conquest. 3 weeks spent in the profound, psychological effort to repress the sound of human laughter. "We are decelerating to approach the absolute perimeter of the Sol system, Supreme Commander," announced Navigator Orion, his voice tight. "Projected transition across the former Plutonian orbital plane in T-5 minutes." Krallos gave a sharp, affirmative nod, his multiplated, ceremonial silver armor, reserved exclusively for planetary subjugation, reflecting the sterile bridge illumination. He was armored for the spectacle of absolute victory. "Is there any quantifiable evidence of preemptive threat detection?" Communications Officer Sif rapidly cross-referenced her long-range passive sensors. "Negative, Commander. No encrypted or open-channel transmissions detected, no signature spikes indicative of defensive energy generation, and 0 positional changes in non-sentient orbital debris. The system remains, statistically, fully inert and transparent." Overconfidence, Krallos scoffed. "The most dependable precursor to irreversible defeat." As the monolithic armada sliced across the established boundary of the Sol system, every sentient Kian aboard the flagship braced for the expected cacophony, alarms, tactical deployment of human defenses, or any logical event to rationalize Admiral Seraphina's bewildering confidence. The cosmic void remained silent. Nothing transpired. "Maintain inward vector," Krallos commanded, the order sharp. "Strict adherence to established battle formation." The Kian warships transitioned deeper into the celestial architecture, effortlessly bypassing the massive, cryogaseous giants Neptune and Uranus without a single kinetic interaction. As the fleet approached the massive planetary structure known as Saturn, Krallos felt the iron tension in his appendages finally slacken. Perhaps the human claims were pure, tactical fabrication. Perhaps 1,000 years of cultural isolation had simply induced global psychological atrophy. "Supreme Commander," Science Officer Zith called out, the sudden spike of alarm in her voice piercing the bridge silence. "I am registering highly anomalous spectroscopic readings originating from Saturn's primary ring system." "Quantify the anomaly." "The rings are exhibiting controlled kinematics," she reported, her voice thick with cognitive confusion. "Large, discrete segments are demonstrating highly localized positional shifts that directly contravene established Newtonian orbital mechanics." Before Krallos could issue a calculated counterresponse, the primary tactical display erupted in a cascade of hostile threat warnings. The vast, cryosilicate structure of Saturn's rings was disintegrating, but not in a chaotic fashion. They were cohering, shifting mass, actively reconstructing their geometry. "They are not cryo-ice structures," Zith whispered, horrified. "The rings are not fragmented rock and stellar debris. They are vessels," Krallos finished, the sudden, paralyzing horror seizing his neural core as millions, no, billions, of microvessels emerged from their perfect, decades-long camouflage. They had maintained physical and electromagnetic parity with inert natural debris, mathematically indistinguishable from the planetary ring system until they began self-actuated movement. "Unilateral communication channel initiated," Sif announced, her voice trembling with the pressure of the moment. The view screen immediately resolved the image of Admiral Seraphina. She stood upon a command deck that appeared functionally analogous to Krallos's own, yet executed with a streamlined, impossibly advanced architectural grace. "Welcome to the Sol system, Commander Krallos," she greeted him, her tone unnervingly cheerful. "I observe you have deployed a full-spectrum family contingency. That is unexpectedly thoughtful." Krallos fought a vicious, internal war to maintain his Kian psychosocial integrity. What is the calculated purpose of this strategic camouflage? Quantify the origin vector of these vessels. Deception? Seraphina questioned, the subtle, vertical crease of her eyebrow a gesture Krallos barely understood. No, simply predictive preparation. Regarding the vessels, we fabricated every single unit. 10 billion, Commander. The millennium of enforced non-aggression provided us with a rather significant surplus of developmental cycles. Quantifiably impossible. Krallos roared, his voice a broken cascade of static. No known galactic civilization can instantiate such a quantitative mass of naval assets. Ah, I recall now. Your shipbuilding methodology still involves manual, organic manipulation, does it not? How remarkably anachronistic, Seraphina countered, allowing herself a brief, chilling smile. We achieved full-spectrum, self-replicating molecular automation approximately 800 years prior. Our current, distributed fabrication matrices can successfully render a fully operational, combat-ready vessel every 1.3 standard seconds. I advise recalculating your force multiplication tables. Krallos whipped his segmented body toward his tactical officer. Weapon status. All tactical systems reporting nominal readiness, Supreme Commander. Lock all targeting arrays onto the emerging fleet and initiate immediate, focused energy deployment. Seraphina let out a theatrical, low-frequency sigh on the display. Truly? That is the strategic vector you selected. Understood. The Kian Armada immediately unleashed its concentrated, apocalyptic fury, 100,000 monolithic capital vessels initiating synchronized discharge upon the microswarm of human assets. The vacuum of space was instantaneously saturated by an incredible electromagnetic surge, a dazzling, terrifying aurora of directed, catastrophic power sufficient to vaporize any conventionally shielded military formation. But the human vessels moved. They did not merely execute defensive evasive maneuvers, they performed a complex, three-dimensional kinetic ballet. They inverted, rotated, and pivoted with mathematically impossible precision, some assets achieving instantaneous rates of acceleration that would have induced immediate, irreversible biological liquefaction in any organic pilot component. They are not utilizing bioorganic crews, Zith gasped, the data point clicking into place. The vessels are fully autonomous kinetic platforms. Analytically correct, Seraphina confirmed, the same expression of casual amusement still present. We designate the formation as the swarm, a distributed cognitive architecture under centralized, full-spectrum AI control. These minds have run iterative, high-fidelity combat simulations based entirely on 900 years of Kian tactical data. They have achieved a significant level of proficiency. 0 confirmed hits. Not a single human asset was compromised. Our operational cycle, Seraphina announced, the amusement abruptly draining from her expression. A preliminary demonstration only. A discrete cluster of human vessels, perhaps 1,000 units extracted from the countless billions, instantaneously broke tactical formation and accelerated with terrifying velocity toward the Kian vanguard. They were minuscule in comparison to the massive, city-sized Kian warships, each no larger than a standard planetary transport shuttle. Initiate defensive containment fields to absolute maximum saturation. Krallos ordered, a tremor in his voice. The human vessels did not expend energy. Instead, they traversed the Kian containment fields as if the electromagnetic barriers were non-existent, a ghost through the complex shield architecture. They then made direct contact with the immense, armored hulls of 20 Kian vessels and phased through the solid, reinforced tritanium. Seconds later, those 20 Kian warships suffered instantaneous molecular decohesion, their structural integrity dissolving into billowing clouds of constituent atoms. The bridge of the Imperial flagship descended into absolute, terrified silence. This quantum displacement field technology, Seraphina explained with scientific detachment, permits our kinetic platforms to temporarily occupy an interdimensional state, existing effectively between conventional states of matter. We derived the functional framework from high-order studies of multiverse quantum mechanics. It provides a rather significant tactical advantage. It is predictably challenging to formulate a defensive countermeasure against an entity that can selectively nullify physical interaction. Krallos's cognitive functions seized. This was not merely generalized technological advancement. This was pure, applied physics bordering on sorcery, a manipulation of reality that defied all Kian epistemological comprehension. Therefore, Seraphina continued, articulating a sharp, percussive sound with her fleshy appendages, I present our non-negotiable counterproposal. You will immediately withdraw your entire deployed fleet and return to Kian space. You will reaffirm the terms of the peace treaty, extending its duration to 10,000 Terran cycles, and we shall, conditionally, expunge this minor tactical miscalculation from our mutual historical archives. And if we elect to refuse this mandate? Krallos managed, his massive voice reduced to a thin, strained whisper. Admiral Seraphina's expression shifted, the amusement replaced by cold, absolute conviction. Then we shall complete the demonstration. The Kian Empire will be required to elect a new Supreme Commander and simultaneously allocate resources for the fabrication of approximately 100,000 replacement capital warships. Supreme Commander Krallos, the victor of 200 military campaigns, had never initiated a tactical retreat across his 300-year operational career. Yet, at that very moment, he was issuing the irrevocable order for the most destructively capable armada in 12 galaxies to reverse vector and disengage from a single, isolated star system. All vessels initiate simultaneous reverse vector translation, he commanded, each synthesized word tasting like bile on his 4 tongues. Maintain integrated defensive lattice. Absolute cessation of aggressive kinetic action. Human vessels are maintaining their present positional coordinates, reported Tactical Officer Reyes. 0 pursuit signature detected. On the view screen, Admiral Seraphina offered a small, affirmative nod of apparent approval. An analytically sound strategic selection, Commander. Your vessels are authorized to exit the system without further tactical engagement. This tactical impasse is non-terminal, Krallos growled, a desperate defiance in his voice. The Kian Empire refuses formal surrender. Naturally not, Seraphina conceded, the corner of her lip twitching with the return of that utterly infuriating smirk. You are merely executing a necessary strategic repositioning phase in anticipation of future, successful conquest protocols. We possess a complete understanding of your systemic imperatives. Krallos's upper pair of eyes tightened, focusing their gaze. You possess native fluency in the Kian primary language. We speak all 3,177 recorded language vectors utilized across the entirety of the Kian Empire, she replied, her tone factual, and this includes the 22 highly encrypted, classified military dialects. Comprehensive linguistic modeling was designated a foundational early research priority. You initiated unauthorized surveillance in direct violation of the non-aggression treaty. Krallos accused. The Admiral laughed again, a sound that seemed to mock the very principles of galactic law. The treaty only imposed a 5-light-year physical exclusion zone around the Kian territorial perimeter. It stipulated 0 prohibitions regarding high-resolution, passive remote observation. We utilized entangled quantum communication links for instantaneous data transmission across unlimited spatial distances. Furthermore, we have maintained a distributed network of microscale observation probes, each possessing a mass profile equivalent to a common dust particle, dispersed throughout your entire empire for approximately 950 years. I advise against wasting resources in attempting to locate them. Krallos felt the thick, burning fluid of rage beginning to cycle rapidly through his upper circulatory system, but Seraphina pressed on. Greatest? By what empirical metric? Territorial acquisition? Yes, your empire holds a definitive spatial advantage. However, when assessing technological sophistication, systemic resource efficiency, core scientific comprehension, or applied medical advancement, I must report that your developmental track appears deficient by several standard centuries. A verifiable falsehood. Krallos roared, his volume exceeding the bridge's internal dampening field. No sentient species can achieve such rapid technological acceleration. The majority of species do not, Seraphina conceded with calm finality. However, most species do not possess our unique biopsychological matrix, an amalgamation of biologically short lifespans, profoundly intense cognitive curiosity, and a driving, omnipresent existential dread. The results achievable by humanity when operating under maximal, focused motivational stimulus are, frankly, astonishing. As the Kian fleet continued its humiliating, high-speed tactical withdrawal, Director Phelan spoke in a low, resonant murmur, a vocal pattern indicating extreme intellectual trauma. Supreme Commander, based on the instantaneous molecular decay of our vessels, I posit that they have achieved control over fundamental matter conversion processes. They are fabricating vessels not from conventional elements, but from raw, organized energy, possibly even drawing stable mass directly from zero-point vacuum fluctuations. Krallos processed the horrific datum. Admiral Seraphina, he stated, forcibly reasserting a veneer of Kian civility, I am compelled to query, what was the original, core imperative for your ancestors to sign the treaty if its purpose was not self-defense? Seraphina's expression softened into something Krallos identified as profound, almost clinical pity. Truthfully? A profound sense of pity. Our first contact specialists performed a comprehensive developmental assessment, concluding that your species occupied an intellectual and technological dead-end trajectory. Our ancestors theorized that providing 1,000 cycles of complete external isolation might allow you to independently self-correct your vector, closing the systemic gap before we were required to engage as true equals. Clearly, that premise was statistically flawed. The bridge achieved a paralyzing silence, the depth of the collective, systemic humiliation a palpable, biological irritant. We shall re-engage, Krallos promised, the absolute desperation causing his vocal synthesizer to briefly fail. We will dedicate all capacity to research, we will accelerate our technological advancement, and we shall return. I possess an honest hope that you will, Seraphina replied, her voice serious. The operational necessity of the local galactic quadrant demands that the Kian species evolve beyond a simple conquest-based imperative. There exist strategic, non-localized existential threats that require an active cooperation lattice, not simple competition, threats that neither humanity nor the Kian Empire can survive in isolated operational status. Krallos's 4 eyes blinked slowly, cycling through profound cognitive confusion. Define these threats? Across 12 subjugated galaxies, we have encountered 0 species possessing a greater concentration of military power than our own. Because their objective is non-detection, Seraphina stated cryptically. They remain in an intelligence-gathering phase. They are actively observing the Kian Empire, just as we have been actively observing your activities for a millennium. Before Krallos could formulate a demand for explicit clarification, the colossal formation of human microvessels initiated a synchronized positional change, not vectoring toward the retreating Kian armada, but moving into an impossibly complex, multi-layered geometric lattice that appeared to induce gravitational lensing and actual warping within the local space-time fabric. What is their current operational goal? Zith pleaded frantically. Supreme Commander, the fleet is actively synthesizing a profound gravitational anomaly, a singularity of immense, localized magnitude. On the primary view screen, the billions of human vessels began an integrated rotation, achieving perfect kinetic and directional synchronization, collectively initiating and generating a hyperdense, artificial gravitational well of mathematically impossible proportions. The physical fabric of space itself began to visibly distort and ripple around the formation. This is merely a low-energy demonstration of systemic capability, Seraphina stated. The swirling, hypercompressed vortex of billions of vessels suffered an instantaneous, calculated implosion, drawing all mass and energy inward, and where the human fleet had existed, a flawlessly formed, gas-giant structure, complete with rings and moons, now floated. An exact, high-fidelity planetary duplicate, instantiated in minutes. Did they just execute large-scale, controlled planetary fabrication? Navigator Orion whispered, his voice incredulous. We shall re-establish contact, Commander Krallos, Seraphina stated, her visual image beginning to pixelate and fade. That contact will occur when you have achieved the requisite intellectual maturity for a substantive dialogue regarding the true galactic future. Until that temporal juncture, I highly recommend optimizing your resource utilization. As the transmission finally ceased and the Kian Armada began its humiliating withdrawal from the Sol system, Krallos remained immobile within his command apparatus, his 4 eyes fixed upon the receding, flawlessly fabricated Saturn duplicate on the view screen. For the first time in his protracted Kian existence, Supreme Commander Krallos fully comprehended the devastating, absolute meaning of primitivism. The transit back to Kia Prime consumed exactly 3 cycles, 3 months characterized by pervasive silence and unendurable systemic shame, 3 months spent by Krallos locked within his private quarters, running desperate, high-speed computational audits of every known human intelligence file, searching frantically for a weakness, a catastrophic flaw in their seemingly godlike technological architecture. He found only emptiness. When the defeated Armada finally achieved orbital insertion above the Kian homeworld, Krallos fully anticipated immediate summary execution or permanent removal from his rank. Instead, the High Council mandated only a restricted, private audience. Provide a full-spectrum account, commanded the massive, unmoving Arch-Councillor Harkan. Krallos delivered a precise, emotionally sanitized recounting of the entire, humiliating tactical encounter. The humans' casual, mocking laughter, the billions of hyper-automated vessels hidden within the planetary rings, the quantum phase-shift drive technology, and the final, horrifying display of instant macro-scale matter fabrication in the form of a duplicate Saturn. And these human entities claim the existence of greater, more destructive threats than themselves? Queried Councillor Krallos. Affirmative, Councillor, Krallos replied, the admission painful. No explicit vector data was provided. Therefore, what strategic mandate do you formally propose, Supreme Commander? Harkan asked, his voice resonating across the chamber. Which course of action provides maximal benefit to the Empire in this unprecedented, critical situation? I propose a total systemic reprioritization toward learning, he stated, the simplicity of the concept profound. The human analysis regarding our intellectual state was correct. We have achieved functional stagnation, driven by profound cultural complacency. For 10,000 cycles, the Empire has prioritized subjugation over creation, acquisition of foreign technology over indigenous development. This operational methodology has rendered us catastrophically vulnerable. You are advocating the fundamental abandonment of the conquest imperative? Growled Councillor Draken, his voice dangerous. Not absolute abandonment, Krallos clarified precisely. A calculated postponement of 1 century, perhaps 2. Reallocating 100% of those resources into focused scientific research and indigenous technological development. And the strategic disposition of humanity during this transitional phase? Asked Morek. If systemic conquest were their primary ideological driver, they would have initiated aggressive hostilities 1,000 cycles past, Krallos stated. They wield a fundamentally distinct class of power, one we lack the conceptual framework to analyze. Arch-Councillor Harkan finally broke his silence. There is empirical wisdom contained within your proposal, Supreme Commander. However, such a foundational paradigm shift will inevitably generate systemic resistance. A significant faction will categorize this vector as unmitigated cowardice. Let the accusations be made, Krallos stated with rock-solid conviction. I have witnessed the inevitable conclusion of our current trajectory, a war that we are mathematically guaranteed to lose, potentially leading to immediate biological extinction. I will willingly accept the accusation of cowardice rather than preside over the total annihilation of our species. The Council accepts the motion. We shall initiate the formal vote. But first, one final, critical matter requires our immediate attention. Harkan issued a precise command to a nearby guard, who then activated a concealed communication console. Escort the designated visitor into the chamber. The colossal, multi-layered chamber doors hissed, retracting into the floor, and to Krallos's absolute astonishment, a solitary human entity entered, Dr. Elias Vance. "Your deployed defensive methodology was quite impressive," Dr. Vance interrupted pleasantly, his tone casual. "I was particularly intrigued by the complex, distributed cognitive architecture utilized in the Cygnus approach, a highly creative implementation. Supreme Commander Krallos, I assume." Krallos hesitantly extended one of his great upper appendages in the unfamiliar human gesture of greeting. "Admiral Seraphina transmits her regards." "State your precise purpose for being here, human," Krallos growled. "To proactively offer technological assistance," Vance replied with disarming simplicity. "And, concurrently, to facilitate the delivery of this." Vance extended his hand, passing Krallos a small, dense, hypercompacted device, a single, black crystalline cube. "This contains the complete, verified scientific and technological history of humanity," Vance explained. "Every discrete discovery, every systemic invention, every theoretical physics framework, from the basic kinetic principle of the wheel to the complex derivation of the quantum phase shift technology. All data is included, except for offensive weapon schematics, which you will be required to deduce through independent research, should you still retain the inclination." Krallos stared, uncomprehending, at the minuscule data device. What logical imperative drives this unconditional data transfer? Vance allowed a genuine, open smile to form. "Because the fundamental mechanism of systemic evolution requires diverse, aggressive competition. For the past 1,000 cycles, humanity has possessed none. We have achieved profound technological acceleration, yes, but operating without external, multivariate intellectual pressure, we have experienced a period of intellectual inbreeding. Our objective is to acquire the Kian Empire as viable colleagues, as strategic partners in the overarching, critical project of genuine galactic civilization. The non-localized threats that Admiral Seraphina referenced are demonstrably extant, and their resolution will require a synergistic, dual-species cognitive effort far exceeding the capacity of isolated human innovation." "And you hold the belief that the Kian Empire would proactively engage in a cooperative aid mandate with humanity against an external threat?" inquired Counselor Krallos, skeptical. "My core belief is that you will act in service of self-preservation," Vance replied, his statement a foundational truth. "The imperative of biological continuance is a profound, shared motivational vector common to both our species, and I predict that, given sufficient temporal bandwidth and the comprehensive data contained within this device," he nodded toward the black crystal in Krallos's grip, "you possess the capacity to evolve into the strategic allies we require." Krallos looked down at the dense, tiny crystal, a relic containing millennia of accumulated human knowledge. This single act would initiate a cascading, catastrophic change. It would completely destabilize the balance of power within the Empire, fracture the existing Kian social hierarchies, re-engineer the entire economic system, and fundamentally restructure their entire mode of existence. Crucially, it would simultaneously lift them from the looming, terminal threat of technological obsolescence. "We formally accept the data offering, Dr. Vance," Krallos stated with finality. "And we accept the intellectual challenge you present." "Excellent. Under these parameters, I am authorized to formally propose a new systemic treaty, one no longer predicated on spatial separation, but structured for immediate, limited cooperation, comprehensive scientific data exchange, cross-cultural dialogue initiatives, and joint strategic preparation for the emergent, external factors." "And the specific parameters concerning offensive and defensive military assets?" Krallos asked, his caution evident. Vance's expression hardened, shifting into a zone of absolute gravity. "We can state with quantifiable certainty that the rate of data release concerning our defensive technological platforms will be directly proportional to the verifiable speed at which the Kian Empire formally and fully abandons its stated offensive ambitions." The implication was clear, cutting through the complex Kian cultural lexicon like a laser, Humanity was offering a verifiable path to advanced survival, but it was not predicated on simple, unconditional trust. That foundational respect would require verifiable, measurable organic effort. While the High Council immediately began a heated, multi-sided debate on the unprecedented structural terms of this new treaty, Krallos found his multiple eyes locked upon the human, observing him now not with the burning vitriol of hatred or systemic resentment, but with a profound, consuming curiosity. How did they achieve such exponential technological velocity? What deep, core drive compelled them toward intellectual exploration rather than simple, territorial conquest? What fundamental knowledge could the once mighty Kian Empire possibly glean from a fragile species confined to a solitary solar perimeter? And perhaps the most maddening puzzle, why did they persist in laughing in the absolute face of existential threat? Even now, as Vance met his gaze across the chamber, Krallos detected the same subtle, infuriating hint of amusement, that same inexplicable, terrifying confidence. Perhaps, Krallos reflected internally, that single data point would represent the first true mystery they would deconstruct: the peculiar, paradoxical psychology of a sentient species that processed declarations of total, planetary war not with predictable, paralyzing fear or defensive anger, but with unrestrained, confident laughter. For the first time since his profound, humiliating retreat from the Sol system, Krallos felt a new, unfamiliar biological function stirring in his circulatory system. Not the visceral, burning thirst for vengeance, nor the dull ache of systemic shame, but curiosity. And as Dr. Vance began eloquently detailing his proposal for integrated, dual-species joint research initiatives, Krallos found himself, against all Kian tactical and historical logic, fully anticipating the future, a future where the Kian Empire might finally evolve into something superior to mere conquerors, something scientifically and intellectually worthy of standing alongside humanity when the true, unknown war inevitably commenced.